Princess Eugenie has stepped down as patron of an anti-slavery charity amid the ongoing scandal surrounding her father, the former Prince Andrew.
A royal charity exit, a scandal that refuses to die, and a princess suddenly stepping away after 7 quiet years. Was it really a simple decision, or was the shadow of her father finally too heavy to carry? For 7 years, Princess Beatrice stood quietly behind one of the world's oldest and most respected anti-slavery campaigns. No dramatic speeches on palace balconies, no glamorous royal spotlight, just a steady, determined presence supporting a cause far removed from royal pageantry. She lent her voice to the fight against modern slavery, human trafficking, and exploitation, the kind of invisible horrors that rarely make headlines but destroy lives every single day. To many observers, she seemed perfectly placed for the role, a royal who understood responsibility, yet lived enough of her life outside palace walls to see the real world. But behind that carefully balanced image, another story was quietly unfolding, a story tangled in family loyalty, royal reputation, and a scandal that still haunts the monarchy like a ghost refusing to disappear. Because while Beatrice worked to support an organization dedicated to protecting victims of exploitation, her own family name remained tied to one of the most disturbing controversies in modern royal history. The scandal surrounding Prince Andrew and his association with convicted trafficker Jeffrey Epstein never truly faded. Years passed, headlines shifted, royal duties changed, yet the questions never fully went away. And for an organization whose entire mission revolves around fighting trafficking and exploitation, the connection, however indirect, created an uncomfortable contradiction that simply refused to stay buried. Anti-Slavery International is not just another charity looking for publicity. Founded in 1839 during the earliest global campaigns to abolish slavery, it carries nearly 2 centuries of history. Its work stretches across continents, exposing forced labor networks hidden in global supply chains and confronting trafficking systems that trap millions of people in modern forms of bondage. For an institution built on moral authority, public trust is everything. Every partnership, every ambassador, every patron must reflect the credibility of that mission. And that is exactly where things became complicated. Princess Beatrice had built a genuine reputation within the organization. She spoke passionately about modern slavery, not with the distant tone of ceremonial duty, but with the voice of someone who truly understood the seriousness of the issue. Her involvement was often described as sincere rather than symbolic. She attended events, supported campaigns, and used her platform to draw attention to problems that most people rarely even think about. On the surface, it looked like a perfect match between royal influence and humanitarian purpose. But perception in the world of human rights is fragile. Even a distant connection to controversy can raise uncomfortable questions. And as scrutiny around Prince Andrew continued to ripple through public conversation, that shadow began to stretch across every corner of the royal family, including the lives of his daughters. The issue was not Beatrice's actions. By most accounts, she had done nothing wrong. The issue was the unavoidable reality that the royal name she carried was permanently tied to a scandal that organizations fighting exploitation could not easily ignore. So after 7 years, the partnership quietly came to an end. There were no dramatic announcements, no accusations, no public conflict. The official statement from Anti-Slavery International was carefully worded, expressing gratitude for the princess's support and acknowledging her contributions over the years. On paper, it looked like a routine transition, but in royal circles, quiet decisions often reveal far more than public statements ever will. Behind the scenes, the calculation appears to have been simple yet painful. For a charity built on moral credibility, even indirect associations with controversy could undermine the message they were trying to deliver. The cause itself had to come first, and that meant stepping away from a royal partnership that once seemed perfectly aligned. Yet the story is far from simple, because for Beatrice, the decision carried a deeper weight than most observers could imagine. Being a member of the royal family means living under a magnifying glass where personal identity is inseparable from family history. Every action is filtered through the lens of legacy, reputation, and public perception. Even the most sincere effort can be reshaped by events beyond one's control. For Beatrice and her younger sister Eugenie, that reality has followed them their entire lives. They grew up watching the monarchy from a complicated position, close enough to feel the weight of royal expectations, but distant enough to remain outside the central line of power. Unlike Prince William, who was raised knowing he would one day become king, Beatrice was never groomed for a defining role within the institution. She existed somewhere on the edge of royal duty, attending events when necessary but largely building her own life outside palace walls. And in many ways, she embraced that freedom. While some royals lived entirely within the carefully controlled world of royal protocol, Beatrice quietly pursued her own career path. She studied history at Goldsmiths, University of London. She worked internships, including time at Sony Pictures, exploring industries far removed from royal ceremonies and state banquets. Later, she stepped into the corporate world, focusing on finance and business development while slowly building a professional identity that existed beyond her royal title. At one point, she even lived in New York, blending into the city under the simple name Beatrice York. In a place where celebrities fill every street corner, she managed to live relatively unnoticed, commuting to work, developing professional skills, and forming friendships outside the royal bubble. It was a life that felt surprisingly normal for someone born into one of the most famous families on earth. But normality for a royal is always temporary. No matter how independent she became, the family she was born into continued to shape public perception of her life. The scandals surrounding Prince Andrew repeatedly dragged the York name back into the spotlight, and each new headline brought renewed scrutiny for everyone connected to him. For Beatrice, the balancing act between personal independence and inherited controversy grew more complicated with every passing year. And yet, despite all of that pressure, she never publicly distanced herself from her father. Loyalty in royal families often runs deeper than public opinion. That loyalty, however, came with a cost. Her defense of Andrew during the worst moments of the scandal sparked criticism that threatened her own reputation. The very reputation she had spent years carefully building through charity work and professional achievements. Some insiders even suggest that this tension played a quiet role in the decision to step away from the anti-slavery charity. It wasn't about abandoning the cause. In fact, the organization itself expressed hope that she would continue supporting efforts against modern slavery in other ways. Stepping down from the title did not mean stepping away from the mission, but it did mean acknowledging the complicated reality of royal life. Because in the monarchy, a single family scandal can ripple outward for years, affecting people who had nothing to do with the original controversy. Beatrice's departure from the charity may look small compared to the scandals dominating headlines, but it reveals something deeper about the hidden pressures of royal existence, the silent sacrifices made to protect institutions, reputations, and causes larger than any individual. After 7 years, one chapter quietly closed. But that chapter was only one piece of a much bigger story. A story involving family loyalty, palace politics, and a plan quietly unfolding behind closed doors. Because while Beatrice was stepping away from one role, Prince William was quietly imagining a completely different future for her inside the monarchy. And that unexpected offer would trigger tensions inside the royal family that few people ever saw coming. Prince William had been watching the slow unraveling of royal reputation for years, quietly, carefully. And unlike many within the palace walls, he was not just thinking about the scandal of the moment, he was thinking about the survival of the monarchy itself. Because behind the polished ceremonies and centuries-old traditions, the royal family had been shrinking. Fewer working royals, fewer trusted figures capable of carrying the weight of public duty. And every scandal, every resignation, every controversy only made the institution look more fragile. William understood something many insiders were reluctant to admit. The monarchy could no longer rely on the same structure that had carried it through the 20th century. If it was going to survive the modern era, it would need a new team, a different kind of royal presence. And in an unexpected twist, one of the names he began considering seriously was Princess Beatrice. At first glance, the idea seemed almost unbelievable. Beatrice had spent most of her life on the edges of royal duty, never truly expected to become a central figure in the monarchy. She attended events when necessary, supported charities when invited, and maintained a respectable public presence. But she had never been molded into the kind of high-profile royal that William himself had been raised to become. Yet that was precisely why he saw potential in her. Unlike many senior royals who had spent their entire lives inside palace routines, Beatrice had lived in the real world. She had worked in corporate offices. She had navigated professional environments where titles meant nothing without results. She understood both tradition and independence, a balance the modern monarchy desperately needed. So at some point behind palace walls, a conversation reportedly took place that would surprise many royal observers. William sat down with Beatrice and explained his vision for the future. He wanted to modernize the monarchy, make it more connected to ordinary people, and reshape the image of royal duty for a new generation. But he knew he could not do it alone. The institution required allies, people who understood the responsibility of being royal, but also possessed the flexibility to adapt to a changing world. And Beatrice, in William's mind, fit that description better than most. The offer itself was not about replacing anyone or reshuffling titles. It was about expanding responsibility. William reportedly wanted Beatrice to step into a more active role, not just appearing occasionally at events, but becoming someone involved in the day-to-day work that sustains the monarchy. He believed she could help bridge the gap between tradition and modern society. Her experience outside royal life gave her credibility with the public, while her loyalty to the family ensured she understood the deeper responsibilities attached to the crown. But the proposal came at an incredibly complicated moment in Beatrice's life. Because while William was imagining a larger role for her within the monarchy, the York family was once again facing a storm that threatened to drag their name back into controversy. The leaked email that resurfaced discussions about Prince Andrew's past connections had ignited new speculation. And suddenly, the quiet stability Beatrice had worked so hard to maintain began to feel fragile once again. Even her professional achievements, her work as an author, speaker, and advocate, risked being overshadowed by the lingering shadow of her father's scandals. Legal advisors reportedly began outlining possibilities to protect reputations and limit further damage. Some insiders claimed that Sarah Ferguson herself was exploring dramatic legal options. Rumors spread that she was considering taking an extraordinary step, pursuing a case that could potentially drag Prince Andrew into a courtroom confrontation that the royal family desperately wanted to avoid. Whether those legal discussions were genuine or merely strategic warnings, the message was unmistakable. Sarah Ferguson had reached a breaking point. For decades, she had stood by Andrew, even after their marriage collapsed and the tabloids turned her into a permanent target. She rebuilt her image slowly, reinventing herself as an author and charity advocate while trying to distance her identity from the chaos surrounding her former husband. But the latest revelations felt different. They suggested that not only Andrew's reputation, but also the reputations of their daughters might once again be pulled into the scandal's orbit. For Sarah, that crossed a line. Friends close to the Duchess of York described her as furious behind closed doors. The woman once known for her forgiving nature appeared ready to transform into something entirely different, someone prepared to defend her daughter's futures no matter the cost. The possibility of a legal battle shook Buckingham Palace. Officials had spent years attempting to stabilize the monarchy after Andrew's fall from grace, carefully limiting his public role and hoping the controversy would slowly fade with time. But a court case, especially one involving his own former wife, threatened to reopen every wound the palace had tried to seal. Inside Royal Lodge, the tension reportedly became impossible to ignore. The sprawling mansion tucked behind the iron gates of Windsor Great Park had once symbolized comfort and stability for Andrew and Sarah. Even after their divorce in 1996, they had continued living together there, maintaining a strange but enduring partnership built on friendship and shared history. But recent months transformed that peaceful estate into something much colder. Did Princess Beatrice step away from her anti-slavery charity simply to protect the credibility of the cause? Or was it the first move in a much larger transformation quietly unfolding inside the monarchy? Because if Prince William truly intends to reshape the royal family for the future, then Princess Beatrice may soon find herself standing much closer to the center of royal power than anyone ever expected.